I'm Madeline Carter, 35, and yesterday I watched my sister's perfect life crumble before my eyes, the same sister who stole my fiancé a decade ago. As I sit here in my modest apartment, scrolling through the chaos unfolding on social media, a strange mixture of vindication and hollowness washes over me. Blood might be thicker than water, but betrayal cuts deeper than both. Before I dive into this wild family drama that's been 10 years in the making, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy real-life revenge stories. Life has a fascinating way of balancing the scales when you least expect it, and trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma finally caught up with the perfect couple who built their happiness on my heartbreak. Growing up as Madeline Carter in the picturesque suburbs of Boston meant living in the shadow of my older sister, Victoria. Just 18 months apart, we should have been allies, confidants even. Instead, our relationship was defined by an unspoken competition that Victoria always seemed to win effortlessly. She was the embodiment of everything our parents valued: straight-A student, homecoming queen, and eventually, the successful corporate lawyer with the corner office and designer wardrobe to match. I wasn't unsuccessful by any means. My career as an architectural designer brought me satisfaction and a comfortable living. But in the Carter family ecosystem, Victoria's achievements always seemed to shine brighter. Her voice carried more weight at family gatherings, and her milestones were celebrated with greater enthusiasm. "You just need to apply yourself more, Maddie," my mother would say, her voice tinged with that particular brand of disappointment that only mothers can perfect. "Look at your sister, partner at her firm by 32. Wouldn't you like that kind of security?" What they never understood was that I had different dreams. I valued creativity over status, fulfillment over titles. I found joy in the elegant functionality of the spaces I designed, even if they didn't come with the prestige Victoria's legal victories did. Then came Alexander Reed. I met him at a charity gala I'd been hired to help design. He was different from the other millionaire donors, thoughtful, genuinely interested in the architectural elements I'd incorporated into the venue. When he asked for my number, I expected nothing more than a potential client connection. Instead, our first date turned into a second, then a third, until suddenly, 8 months later, he was down on one knee in the Japanese garden I'd always told him was my favorite place in the city. Alexander was everything I hadn't known I was looking for: brilliant but humble, wealthy but generous, ambitious but present. For the first time, I felt like I had something that even Victoria couldn't overshadow. My parents were ecstatic, suddenly interested in my life in a way they'd never been before. "We always knew you'd find your way, dear," my father said, conveniently forgetting years of comparing me unfavorably to Victoria. The engagement party was held at my parents' sprawling colonial home. I still remember the weight of the 3-carat oval diamond on my finger, how it caught the light as I gestured during conversations. How Victoria's eyes followed that sparkle throughout the evening. "He's quite a catch," she'd said, sipping champagne as we stood momentarily alone in the kitchen. There was something in her tone I couldn't quite place: assessment, perhaps, or calculation. "I'm happy for you, little sister." In retrospect, all the signs were there. The way she touched Alexander's arm when she laughed at his jokes. The prolonged eye contact when they thought no one was watching. The sudden interest Victoria took in his financial technology company, claiming her law firm could offer valuable counsel. "I should introduce Alexander to some of my connections," she'd told me. "His startup has potential, but with the right introductions, it could be worth 10 times what it is now." Always the helpful big sister. Always looking out for me by inserting herself directly into my happiness. I dismissed the uneasy feeling in my stomach as insecurity, my lifelong companion when it came to Victoria. After all, she was engaged herself to Benjamin, her college sweetheart and fellow attorney. They were the perfect power couple, already shopping for brownstones in the most exclusive parts of Boston. Why would she want what I had? 2 weeks before the wedding, Alexander asked to meet for coffee, not dinner, not at our usual place, but at an impersonal cafe halfway between his office and mine. His face was grave, his hands fidgeting with the paper coffee cup. "I don't know how to say this, Maddie," he started, unable to meet my eyes. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I don't think I can go through with the wedding. The cafe noise faded to a distant hum. I remember noticing how the barista called out orders as if the world wasn't collapsing around me, as if my future wasn't disintegrating with each word Alexander spoke. Is there someone else? I asked, already knowing the answer. His silence was confirmation enough. When he finally spoke, the words hit like individual bullets. Victoria and we didn't mean for it to happen. We've been working closely on some legal aspects of my company's expansion, and things evolved. My sister, I said flatly. Not a question. He nodded, misery etched into his features, though not enough misery to stop him from destroying me. She broke things off with Benjamin last week. We wanted to tell you together, but she thought it might be easier coming from me first. How considerate of them both. How long? My voice sounded strange, detached, as if belonging to someone else. 2 months, he admitted. Maddie, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. The most devastating part wasn't losing Alexander, it was the realization that once again, I had found something precious, only for Victoria to decide she wanted it for herself. And once again, she had won. 3 months after Alexander broke off our engagement, I received a cream-colored envelope in the mail, its expensive paper embossed with gold lettering. Victoria and Alexander cordially invited me to celebrate their union. The wedding was scheduled for the exact same date Alexander and I had chosen, at the same exclusive vineyard we had booked. They hadn't even bothered to change the venue. My mother called that evening, her voice wavering between excitement and awkward concern. Victoria wants you to be her maid of honor, sweetheart. She says no one else would feel right standing beside her. The audacity was breathtaking. I declined, of course, citing a work commitment that couldn't be rescheduled. My mother's disappointment was palpable. This could be a beautiful way to heal the rift between you girls. Family is everything, Maddie. Someday you'll understand that holding on to grudges only hurts you. I didn't attend the wedding. Instead, I accepted a job offer in Seattle, as far from Boston as I could reasonably go without leaving the country. I needed distance, not just from Victoria and Alexander, but from my parents who somehow expected me to celebrate the relationship that had formed from my heartbreak. They viewed my absence at the wedding as childish, a temporary tantrum that I would eventually outgrow. You're being selfish, my father said during our last conversation before I moved. Victoria is still your sister. Alexander wasn't the right man for you, but he makes her happy. Can you find it in your heart to want happiness for your sister? It was always about Victoria's happiness. Never about the betrayal, never about my pain. Seattle became my sanctuary. I rented a small apartment overlooking Puget Sound, found a position with a progressive architecture firm that valued my vision, and slowly built a new life for myself. I made friends who knew nothing about Victoria, nothing about being the lesser sister, nothing about the fiancé who had chosen my sister over me. For the first time, I was just Madeline, not Victoria's sister, not the jilted bride, just me. I limited contact with my family to obligatory holiday calls and occasional emails. I sent birthday gifts to my parents, but never returned to Boston for celebrations. Victoria attempted to reach out several times during that first year, sending text messages that oscillated between defensive justification and hollow apologies. I know you probably hate me right now, but I hope someday you'll understand that what Alexander and I have is real, she wrote 3 months after their wedding. This wasn't about hurting you. Sometimes love happens in unexpected ways. I never responded. What could I say to someone who genuinely believed her happiness justified any amount of pain inflicted on others, especially her own sister? Through mutual friends and social media, I watched from afar as Victoria and Alexander built their picture-perfect life together. His company expanded internationally, making him not just a millionaire, but a centimillionaire within 5 years of their marriage. They purchased a historical mansion in Beacon Hill, renovated it to magazine-worthy perfection, and regularly appeared in Boston's social pages at charity galas and exclusive events. They had twin boys, perfect blonde copies of Victoria and Alexander's blended genetics. Their Christmas cards showed a growing family against backdrops of their Aspen ski lodge or Santorini vacation villa. Victoria's career flourished alongside Alexander's business empire. She became managing partner at her firm, specializing in mergers and acquisitions for tech companies just like his. Meanwhile, I dated occasionally, but nothing serious materialized. Each relationship reached a point where I found myself holding back, unable to fully trust, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You've got walls up higher than the Space Needle," my last boyfriend had said while breaking things off after 8 months. I don't think anyone's getting over them anytime soon. He wasn't wrong. The betrayal had fundamentally altered how I approached relationships, not just romantic ones, but all connections. I kept people at arm's length, always braced for disappointment, always ready for abandonment. 7 years after moving to Seattle, I received a phone call from my mother. My father had suffered a heart attack. He was stable, but would need bypass surgery. Could I come home? The word home struck me as strange. Boston hadn't felt like home in a very long time. Still, I booked a flight for the following morning. Whatever my feelings toward my family, I couldn't stay away at such a time. As I packed my suitcase, I wondered if I would see Victoria and Alexander, if their children would be there, if I could maintain my composure in their presence after all these years. I wasn't ready to forgive, but perhaps I was ready to coexist in the same space without falling apart. That would have to be enough. The Boston Logan International Airport hadn't changed much in 7 years, still the same maze of terminals, still the same distinctive accent bouncing off the walls as announcements echoed through the corridors. What had changed was me. I was no longer the devastated younger sister fleeing with a broken heart. I had built something for myself in Seattle, a career I was proud of, a small circle of genuine friends, a life that was entirely my own creation. My mother waited at arrivals, looking older than I remembered, the worry about my father etched into the lines around her eyes. She embraced me tightly, holding on a beat too long. "Thank you for coming, Maddie," she whispered. "It means so much to your father, to all of us." The all of us hung in the air between us. Victoria, Alexander, their children, the family that had formed in my absence. "How is he?" I asked, steering the conversation to safer territory as we walked to the parking garage. "Stable. The doctors say the surgery has a high success rate. He's scheduled for tomorrow morning." She hesitated before adding, "Everyone's gathering at the house tonight. Your father wanted the family together before the procedure." I nodded, swallowing hard. Of course, there would be no buffer, no gradual reintroduction to the sister who had betrayed me or the man who had broken my heart. I would be thrust directly into the full family tableau. "Victoria is very glad you're coming," my mother ventured, glancing sideways at me as she navigated through traffic. "The boys are excited to meet their aunt." I made a noncommittal noise. The twins were innocent in all this, 7-year-olds who knew nothing of the complicated history between their parents and their aunt. I would be kind to them, certainly, but the thought of seeing miniature versions of Victoria and Alexander made my stomach clench. The family home looked exactly as I remembered it, the colonial with the blue shutters, the carefully maintained garden that had been my mother's pride, the wide porch where Alexander had first asked my parents for their blessing to propose. Memories flooded back with each step up the familiar driveway. Inside, voices drifted from the kitchen, adult conversation punctuated by the higher pitches of children. Taking a deep breath, I followed my mother toward the sound. They were all there, Victoria at the kitchen island arranging a charcuterie board, Alexander pouring wine, 2 blonde boys sitting at the table working on what looked like homework. My sister looked up first, her practiced smile faltering slightly when our eyes met. "Maddie," she said, setting down the knife she'd been using. "You're here." There was an awkward moment where neither of us seemed to know the appropriate greeting. Should we hug as sisters? Shake hands as estranged relatives? In the end, Victoria settled for a quick embrace that felt more performative than genuine. "You look well," she said, stepping back to assess me. "Seattle must agree with you." "It does," I replied simply, turning to acknowledge Alexander with a nod. "Alexander." Madeline. His use of my full name, something he'd never done when we were together, created a deliberate distance between us. "Thank you for coming. Your father will be happy to see you." The twins looked up curiously, and Victoria motioned them over. Boys, this is your Aunt Madeline. Can you say hello? They approached dutifully, miniature versions of their parents in pressed khakis and button-down shirts. Hello, Aunt Madeline, they chorused, clearly well-trained in manners. This is Ethan, Victoria said, placing her hand on one boy's shoulder, and this is Oliver. I smiled at them, seeing both Victoria and Alexander in their features. It's nice to meet you both. With introductions complete, an uncomfortable silence settled over the kitchen. My mother busied herself getting plates from the cabinet, while Victoria returned to her charcuterie arrangement. Dad's resting upstairs, Victoria informed me. The medication makes him tired, but he wanted to see you as soon as you arrived. I nodded, grateful for an excuse to exit the strained atmosphere. I'll go up now. My father looked frilier than I'd expected, propped up against pillows in the bedroom he'd shared with my mother for over 40 years. His eyes brightened when I entered. There's my Maddie, he said, extending his hand to me. Come sit with your old dad. I sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand in mine. Hey, Dad. How are you feeling? Like a truck ran over me, he chuckled weakly. But they say I'll be good as new after tomorrow. He studied my face. You look good, sweetheart. Happy. I am, I said, surprised to realize it was mostly true. I like my life in Seattle. He nodded, his expression growing serious. I've missed you, Maddie. We all have. I squeezed his hand, but didn't respond directly to that statement. We both knew it wasn't entirely accurate. My absence had made things easier for everyone, no awkward family dynamics to navigate, no uncomfortable reminders of the past. Listen, he continued, his voice lower now, I know why you left. I know we didn't handle things well back then. Your mother and I, we should have been more understanding of your feelings. This was as close to an apology as I'd ever heard from him. I felt a lump forming in my throat. I'm not asking you to forgive and forget, he added. I'm just asking you to consider that life is short. Too short for estrangement. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The heart attack had clearly prompted some reflection on his part. Victoria regrets how things happened, he said carefully. She's not the same person she was 10 years ago. I doubted that very much. From what I'd seen downstairs, Victoria was exactly the same. Perfectly put together, effortlessly commanding the room, still expecting the world to revolve around her needs and desires. I'll try, Dad, I said, knowing it was what he needed to hear before his surgery. For you. He smiled, patting my hand. That's all I ask. Dinner that evening was a masterclass in polite conversation that carefully avoided anything meaningful. We discussed my father's surgery, the twins' private school achievements, Boston weather compared to Seattle's. Victoria dominated much of the conversation, detailing her recent legal triumph in a high-profile merger case. Alexander spoke of his company's expansion into emerging Asian markets. When my mother asked about my work in Seattle, I had barely outlined my recent sustainable housing project before Victoria interrupted with a story about the charity foundation she and Alexander had established. The familiar dynamic reasserted itself effortlessly, Victoria taking center stage, my contribution relegated to the wings. After dinner, while helping my mother with dishes, I overheard Victoria and Alexander in the living room. Their voices carried through the hallway, not quite whispers, but lowered enough that they clearly thought themselves private. How long is she staying? Alexander asked. Just until Dad's out of recovery, I think, Victoria replied. She hasn't exactly been forthcoming with her plans. She seems different, he commented. More reserved. Victoria laughed softly. Maddie was always the quiet one. Remember how she used to hide behind her sketchbooks at parties? That's not what I mean, he said. She seems harder somehow. Well, she's been single all these years. No husband, no children. That would make anyone a bit bitter, wouldn't it? My hands stilled on the plate I was drying. The casual cruelty in her assessment struck like a physical blow. Not everyone needs a conventional family to be fulfilled, Vic, Alexander said, surprising me with his defense. Of course not, Victoria conceded, though her tone suggested otherwise. But look at her, 35, living alone across the country, barely in touch with her family. You can't tell me that's the life she imagined for herself. I set down the plate and towel, my appetite for family reconnection suddenly evaporated. Tomorrow, I would be at the hospital for my father's surgery. I would stay until he was stable. And then I would return to Seattle, to the life that Victoria so casually dismissed, but that I had built with purpose and care. Some wounds, I realized, never truly heal. They just become part of who you are, incorporated into the architecture of your being like the load-bearing walls of a house. Victoria had taken Alexander from me 10 years ago, but I wouldn't let her diminish the life I'd created in their absence. My father's surgery went well. The relief in the waiting room was palpable as the surgeon explained that they had successfully bypassed the blockages and his prognosis was excellent. My mother wept quietly, Victoria held her hand, and I stood slightly apart, watching my sister comfort our mother with the practiced ease of someone who had been present for all the family crises I had missed. In the days that followed, as my father began his recovery, I found myself falling into an uneasy routine. Mornings at the hospital, afternoons helping my mother with household tasks, evenings enduring family dinners where Victoria invariably steered conversations toward her family's achievements or reminiscences that pointedly excluded my 7-year absence. Remember last Christmas when the boys performed that adorable piano recital? She would ask my mother, fully aware I had not been present, before turning to me with a manufactured afterthought. "Oh, that's right, you weren't there, Maddie." It was so precious. Each comment was designed to emphasize my outsider status while maintaining plausible deniability. If I reacted, I would be the overly sensitive one, still harboring resentment after all these years. Alexander, for his part, maintained a polite distance. We spoke when necessary, never about anything substantive, and never alone. The twins regarded me with cautious curiosity, clearly having absorbed some awareness of the complicated dynamics between their mother and aunt. It was Ethan who unwittingly provided the first glimpse of trouble in paradise. One afternoon while Victoria was on a work call and Alexander was at the office, I found myself alone with the boys in the family room. Oliver was absorbed in a book, but Ethan watched me sketching ideas for a new project. "What are you drawing?" he asked, sidling closer. "It's a community center I'm designing in Seattle," I explained, showing him the preliminary sketches. "See how these windows capture the natural light but also provide views of the surrounding park?" He nodded seriously, studying the drawings with unexpected interest. "I like drawing buildings too. Mom says it's a waste of time, though." The comment, delivered with childlike candor, revealed so much about Victoria's unchanged values. "It's not a waste of time," I told him gently. "Architecture is about creating spaces where people can live, work, and connect with each other." Ethan's face brightened. "That's what I told her. But she says I should focus on math and science if I want to be successful like Dad." The parallels to our own childhood were unmistakable. Victoria was raising her sons with the same rigid metrics of success that our parents had applied to us. Math and science are important, I acknowledged, but so is creativity and understanding how people use spaces. Some of the most successful architects combine both. He seemed to consider this. "Dad takes me to look at buildings sometimes, when Mom's working on weekends. He says they tell stories about the people who made them." This revelation surprised me. The Alexander I had known appreciated architecture aesthetically, but had never expressed such philosophical thoughts about it. "Your dad is right," I said, wondering what other changes the years had wrought in the man I once thought I knew completely. Our conversation was interrupted by Victoria's return, her work call concluded. She eyed us with barely concealed suspicion. "What are you two discussing so intently?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "Aunt Maddie's drawings," Ethan replied enthusiastically. "She's designing a community center with really cool windows." Victoria's smile tightened. "That's nice, sweetheart, but isn't it time for your piano practice? Both of you upstairs now." The boys obediently gathered their things, Ethan casting a regretful glance at my sketchbook before following his brother. When they were gone, Victoria turned to me. "I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't fill Ethan's head with unrealistic ideas, Maddie. He already spends too much time daydreaming instead of focusing on his studies." I met her gaze steadily. "We were just talking about architecture, Victoria. Hardly radical content." "You know what I mean," she said, lowering her voice. Ethan needs to develop practical skills. The world doesn't reward dreamers. It rewarded me, I pointed out. I run my own successful studio now. She raised an eyebrow. And that's wonderful for you. But Alexander and I have different aspirations for our children. The implication was clear. My life choices were acceptable for me, but would represent failure for her sons. Before I could respond, her phone rang again, Alexander's name flashing on the screen. I need to take this, she said, turning away. Alex, darling, what's wrong? I couldn't hear Alexander's response, but Victoria's body language shifted immediately, tension radiating through her previously perfect posture. What do you mean the SEC is asking questions? She hissed, walking quickly toward the study for privacy. The snippet of conversation lodged in my mind. Securities and Exchange Commission inquiries were never casual matters for financial technology companies like Alexander's. I dismissed the thought. Whatever business problems they might be facing were none of my concern. That evening, the tension between Victoria and Alexander was evident despite their attempts to maintain a united front. Their usual synchronized conversational volleys were replaced by strained silences and curt exchanges. The twins seemed to sense the atmosphere, behaving with exaggerated politeness. After the boys were in bed, I overheard them arguing in hushed tones on the back porch. I told you we needed to disclose those transactions. Victoria's voice was sharp with accusation. This is exactly what I warned you about. The board overruled you, Alexander replied. You know that. We all agreed. No, you and your sycophantic board agreed. I advised against it explicitly. Well, it's too late now, he snapped. We need to present a united front when the auditors arrive next week. United front. Victoria's laugh held no humor. Like we were when you assured me this approach was completely legal? When you swore the offshore structures would never raise red flags. Lower your voice, Alexander hissed. The last thing we need is family hearing our business. I stepped away from the window, processing what I'd overheard. It sounded like Alexander's company was under investigation for potential financial improprieties, and Victoria was implicated through her legal advice, or lack thereof. The perfect power couple might not be standing on such solid ground after all. The next morning, the headline in the Boston Business Journal confirmed my suspicions. TechFin giant QuantumPay under SEC investigation for potential accounting irregularities. Alexander's company was facing serious allegations of misstating earnings and hiding losses through complex offshore structures. At breakfast, Victoria was conspicuously absent, having left early for the office according to my mother. Alexander appeared haggard, checking his phone obsessively between mechanical bites of toast. The twins ate quietly, picking up on the strained atmosphere. Everything all right, Alexander? My mother asked, concerned. You look tired. Just some work stress, he replied dismissively. Nothing to worry about. But there was plenty to worry about, as became clear in the days that followed. The investigation expanded, with rumors of potential criminal charges swirling in financial circles. Alexander spent most of his time with lawyers, while Victoria disappeared into 18-hour workdays, presumably trying to distance herself professionally from the brewing scandal. As my father's condition improved and he prepared to return home, I extended my stay in Boston, not out of family solidarity, but out of a morbid fascination with watching the perfect facade of Victoria and Alexander's life begin to crack under pressure. Hey everyone, I can tell this story is getting intense. If you're enjoying this real-life family drama so far, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to catch the conclusion. I'd love to know what you think Victoria and Alexander are hiding. Drop your theories in the comments below. I'll be back after this short break to continue the story and reveal just how deep this financial deception goes. 2 weeks after my father's surgery, with his recovery progressing well, Victoria and Alexander's carefully constructed world began to collapse in earnest. What had started as whispers of financial irregularities exploded into front-page news when a former executive at QuantumPay came forward as a whistleblower, alleging systematic fraud orchestrated by Alexander and approved by the company's legal counsel, Victoria's law firm, with her as the lead attorney on the account. The twins were sent to stay with Alexander's parents in Connecticut, shielded from the media trucks that now regularly parked outside Victoria and Alexander's Beacon Hill mansion. My parents' home became an unlikely sanctuary, far enough from the epicenter of the scandal to avoid press attention, but close enough for Victoria and Alexander to manage the crisis while maintaining appearances of family solidarity. I watched it all with a detached fascination, like observing the controlled demolition of a structure I once helped design. The architect in me recognized the methodical way pressure points were being exposed, each new revelation weakening another support beam in their carefully constructed life. "They're saying I knowingly misled investors," Alexander explained to my parents one evening, his voice hollow as he paced the living room. "That I created shell companies to hide losses and inflate quarterly earnings." My mother made sympathetic noises, while my father, still recovering but sharp as ever, asked the question no one else would. "Did you, son?" The momentary hesitation before Alexander's denial spoke volumes. "Of course not, Robert. This is a witch hunt driven by competitors who want to see Quantum Pay fail." Victoria sat rigidly on the sofa, her perfect posture now a brittle shell containing barely suppressed panic. "The whistleblower's claims are exaggerated and taken out of context," she added. "We'll fight this and win." I remained silent, observing how they bolstered each other's denials, wondering if they even recognized their own lies anymore or if they'd been repeating them so long they'd become truth in their minds. Later that night, I found Victoria alone in the kitchen, staring into a glass of bourbon. She looked up when I entered, her usual mask of superiority momentarily absent, revealing something I rarely saw: vulnerability. "Come to gloat, Maddie?" she asked, but the question lacked her usual edge. I poured myself a glass of water. "No. Despite what you might think, I don't enjoy seeing anyone's life fall apart." She studied me for a moment, then laughed bitterly. "That's what makes you different from me, I suppose. I would absolutely gloat if our positions were reversed." The admission, stark in its honesty, caught me off guard. "Why are you telling me this?" Victoria swirled the amber liquid in her glass. "Maybe because everything's falling apart anyway. Maybe because I'm tired of pretending." She took a long swallow of bourbon. "Or maybe because you're the only person who already thinks the worst of me, so there's nothing left to lose." I sat down across from her, intrigued by this uncharacteristic candor. "What exactly are you pretending about, Victoria?" She stared at me for a long moment, calculation warring with desperation in her eyes. Finally, she sighed. "The perfect marriage. The perfect career. The perfect life." She gestured vaguely. "None of it's real, Maddie. It hasn't been for years." "What do you mean?" "Alexander and I," she began, then stopped, recalibrating. "We should have separated 3 years ago. The only reason we didn't is because of the company. His investors wouldn't have responded well to a messy divorce right before the IPO. I processed this information, trying to reconcile it with the united front they'd always presented. But you seem so perfect," she supplied with a sardonic smile. "That was the point. We're very good at appearances. Always have been." She finished her drink. "The irony is, I didn't even want him in the first place." The statement hung in the air between us, its implications staggering. I felt my chest tighten. "What?" Victoria avoided my gaze, focusing instead on refilling her glass. "I wanted what you had with him, the devotion, the partnership. Alexander looked at you like you hung the moon, Maddie. No one had ever looked at me that way." She took another sip. "I convinced myself that if I could just get him to choose me instead, I'd have that too." "But you didn't," I said quietly, the realization dawning. "No," she admitted. "Once he was mine, the challenge was gone. And then I discovered he wasn't who I thought he was either." She laughed humorlessly. "Did you know he had affairs?" "3 that I know of, probably more." I hadn't known, but somehow wasn't surprised. "Why stay together then?" "Image. Money. The boys." She listed them mechanically. "And then there was the company. His precious Quantum Pay that needed the perfect founder with the perfect family to attract perfect investors." Her voice dripped with contempt. "You know what the worst part is? I helped him hide everything, the affairs, the financial manipulation, all of it. My legal expertise put to work concealing his indiscretions, personal and professional. The Victoria before me was almost unrecognizable, bitter, resentful, a far cry from the polished, confident woman who had always made me feel inadequate. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as my perfect older sister, but as someone who had sacrificed her integrity for status and was now paying the price. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked again, genuinely confused by her sudden openness. She looked at me directly, her eyes glassy from alcohol but focused. "Because it's all going to come out anyway. The SEC has everything: emails, recorded board meetings, offshore account details. They know I helped structure the deals that hid the losses." She laughed again, a broken sound. "I'm going to lose my license to practice law at minimum. At worst, well, people go to prison for securities fraud." The magnitude of what she was saying sank in. "Victoria, don't," she cut me off. "Don't you dare pity me. I made my choices." She drained her glass again. "Besides, there's more." More? I couldn't imagine what could be worse than potential criminal charges. Alexander isn't just facing SEC charges. He's been moving money, our money, offshore for months. Preparing for this, I think. Her voice was steady despite the alcohol. "If the company collapses, which it will, we'll lose everything. The house, the cars, the boys' trust funds, all of it." I struggled to process the scale of the implosion she was describing. "What will you do?" "Fight, of course," she said, some of her old determination resurfacing. "I've started cooperating with the investigation. Limited immunity in exchange for information." She smiled thinly. "Alexander doesn't know yet." The revelation stunned me. Victoria was turning on Alexander to save herself. "The boys will be better off with one parent who made a deal than two parents in prison," she said firmly. "I'm doing what I have to do to protect them." I nodded, understanding her reasoning even as I recoiled from the ruthlessness of it. The sister who had stolen my fiancé was now betraying him to save herself. There was a certain symmetry to it all. Victoria stood, steadying herself against the counter. "You know what's funny? All these years, I thought I had won. That I'd beaten you by taking Alexander. But you're the only one who came out unscathed." She looked at me with something approaching respect. "You escaped." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, her expression hardening. "Alexander's coming back from his lawyers." Not a word about this conversation. Just like that, the moment of vulnerability vanished and my sister's walls came back up. But something had fundamentally shifted between us. For the first time in our adult lives, I didn't feel diminished in her presence. Instead, I felt an unexpected emotion toward my once invincible sister: pity. The following morning brought the news that Victoria had hinted at during our late-night conversation. The Boston Globe's headline was devastating: Quantum Pay CEO Alexander Reed steps down amid criminal investigation. The article detailed allegations of systematic fraud spanning 5 years, with potential criminal charges forthcoming for both Alexander and key executives involved in the scheme. Victoria's name wasn't mentioned, but reading between the lines, it was clear that the unnamed legal counsel cooperating with authorities was her. Alexander had been thrown under the bus by his own wife, the same woman who had once betrayed her sister to be with him. Karma, it seemed, had finally come calling. Breakfast that morning was a tense affair. My parents read the newspaper in silence, occasionally exchanging worried glances. Alexander was conspicuously absent, having left at dawn for an emergency meeting with his defense team, according to my mother. Victoria appeared precisely at 8, dressed immaculately in a charcoal suit, her face betraying nothing of last night's vulnerability or the bombshell that had just hit the financial pages. "I've been called in to give a statement," she announced, accepting a cup of coffee but declining breakfast. "I'm not sure when I'll be back." My father looked up from his newspaper. "Victoria, is there anything we should know? Anything you want to tell us?" For a moment, I thought she might break, might reveal to our parents the same truths she had shared with me in the kitchen. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, her attorney mask firmly in place. "It's a complex situation, Dad. I can't discuss details, but please know I'm doing everything I can to protect our family. The careful wording was deliberate, she wasn't lying, but her definition of family had narrowed to include only herself and her sons. Alexander had been excised from that equation. After she left, my mother turned to me, worry etched across her face. Maddie, do you know what's happening? Victoria seems different. I hesitated, torn between loyalty to the confidences my sister had shared and my obligation to prepare my parents for what was coming. I think Victoria and Alexander are facing serious legal troubles, I said carefully. And I don't think their marriage is going to survive it. My father nodded slowly, as if this confirmed suspicions he'd already harbored. I was afraid of that. They've been performative lately. More like business partners than spouses. The assessment surprised me. My parents had always seemed so enthralled by Victoria and Alexander's perfect life that I hadn't considered they might see through the facade. Perhaps I had underestimated them as much as they had underestimated me. The day unfolded in a series of increasingly dramatic revelations. Alexander returned briefly to collect clothes before leaving again without speaking to anyone. Hours later, Victoria called my mother to say she wouldn't be home that night. She was staying in a hotel downtown to be closer to her legal team. The twins, still with Alexander's parents in Connecticut, would remain there until things settled down. By evening, financial news channels were reporting that QuantumPay's stock had been suspended from trading after losing 60% of its value. The company that had made Alexander a centimillionaire was effectively worthless, with analysts predicting bankruptcy proceedings would begin within days. The following morning, I woke to raised voices downstairs. Pulling on a robe, I found Alexander in the living room confronting my father, his normally polished appearance disheveled, eyes wild with barely contained fury. "Where is she?" he demanded. "I know she's been in contact with you." My father, still recovering but standing his ground, kept his voice level. "Alexander, I haven't spoken to Victoria since yesterday morning, same as you. Whatever's happening between you two needs to be handled through your lawyers now." "She's ruined me," Alexander spat. "Turned over everything to the feds. Emails, board minutes, offshore account details, everything. 10 years of marriage, and she sells me out to save herself." My presence in the doorway caught his attention, and his anger found a new target. "This must be quite satisfying for you, isn't it, Maddie? Watching it all fall apart." Despite everything, I felt no joy in his downfall, only a profound sadness for the collateral damage, especially the twins. "I take no pleasure in seeing families destroyed, Alexander. Not even yours." He laughed bitterly. "Always the better person. No wonder Victoria hated you so much." The statement landed like a physical blow. "What are you talking about? You really don't know." He looked genuinely surprised. "Victoria didn't steal me because she wanted me. She did it because she couldn't stand that you might have something she didn't. You were the only person who ever threatened her sense of superiority." My father stepped between us. "That's enough, Alexander. I think you should leave." Alexander ignored him, his focus still on me. "You want to know the truth, Maddie?" Victoria approached me. "Told me you were having second thoughts about the wedding, but were too kind to break it off. Said you'd be relieved if I ended things." His laugh was hollow. I was an idiot to believe her, but she was very convincing. By the time I realized what had really happened, we were already married. The revelation left me speechless. All these years, I'd believed Alexander had been seduced away, that Victoria had simply been more desirable, more worthy of his love. The idea that she had deliberately manipulated him and me was both vindication and fresh wound combined. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally managed. "Because it's all burning down anyway," he said, his anger deflating into resignation. "And because you deserve to know you weren't discarded. You were sacrificed by both of us." My father placed a steady hand on Alexander's shoulder. "I think it's time for you to go, son. There's nothing more to be accomplished here." Alexander nodded, suddenly looking exhausted. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth, Maddie, I'm sorry. Not just for now, but for 10 years ago. You deserved better." After he left, my father and I sat in stunned silence, processing Alexander's revelations. Finally, my father spoke. I owe you an apology too, Maddie. Your mother and I. We should have seen what Victoria was doing. Should have supported you better. I squeezed his hand, years of resentment not erased, but somehow softened by his acknowledgement. We all believed what Victoria wanted us to believe, Dad. That was her real talent. The next 3 days brought a whirlwind of developments. Alexander was formally indicted on multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. Victoria, true to her survival instincts, was named as a cooperating witness rather than a co-defendant, her deal with prosecutors apparently secured before the investigation became public. Their Beacon Hill mansion was listed for sale, along with vacation properties in Aspen and the Hamptons. Victoria filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting full custody of the twins. The society pages that had once chronicled their ascent now documented their fall with equal enthusiasm, each new detail more damning than the last. Through it all, Victoria maintained her public composure, appearing polished and controlled during brief press statements. But in private, during her increasingly rare appearances at our parents' house, the cracks in her facade widened. She lost weight, developed a nervous tic in her left eye, and jumped at unexpected sounds. The invincible older sister was crumbling before my eyes. 5 days after Alexander's indictment, Victoria and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen again. This time, she was sober but no less forthcoming. "You've heard from Alexander," she said. "Not a question." I nodded. "He came by looking for you. And he told you his version of how we got together." Again, not a question. "Is it true?" I asked, needing to hear it from her. "Did you deliberately separate us?" Victoria met my gaze unflinchingly. "Yes. No excuses, no justifications, just stark admission." I had imagined this moment for years, the confrontation, the confession, the closure I thought I needed. But now that it had arrived, I felt nothing but exhaustion. "Why, Victoria? What did I ever do to deserve that?" "Nothing," she admitted. "That was the problem. You were the good one, kind, talented, authentic. I was accomplished, successful, admired, but never loved the way you were." She twisted her wedding ring, now a mockery of the vows it represented. "When Alexander looked at you, it was with something I'd never inspired in anyone. I wanted to prove I could take that too. That nothing was beyond my reach." The honesty was breathtaking in its cruelty. And was it worth it? 10 years of a marriage built on lies, ending in criminal charges and public humiliation. She flinched, but recovered quickly. Obviously not. But by the time I realized my mistake, there was too much at stake to walk away. The company, the boys, our reputation. She trailed off, then added softly, "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Maddie. I just want you to know that you were right all along. About me, about Alexander, about all of it." In that moment, looking at my sister, still beautiful, still proud, but fundamentally broken, I realized that no revenge I could have conceived would have been more complete than the one she had inadvertently orchestrated against herself. She had taken Alexander from me, yes, but in doing so, she had condemned herself to a decade of hollow success and private misery, culminating in this spectacular implosion. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Start over," she said simply. "Somewhere new with the boys. My testimony against Alexander and the board will keep me out of prison, but my legal career is over. The Bar Association doesn't look kindly on ethical violations of this magnitude, even with immunity deals." I nodded, understanding that despite everything, Victoria would land on her feet, diminished, but not destroyed. She had always been a survivor. "And you?" she asked. "Will you go back to Seattle?" "Yes," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. "My life is there now." Victoria nodded, a flicker of what might have been regret crossing her features. "We really made a mess of things, didn't we? You and I. It was the closest to an apology I was likely to get." "You made a mess, Victoria. I just got caught in it." For once, she didn't argue. 1 month after my father's heart surgery, I returned to Seattle, leaving behind a family forever altered by Victoria and Alexander's spectacular fall from grace. My father was recovering well, my mother was adapting to their new reality, and Victoria was navigating the aftermath of her choices with the same determination she had always applied to getting what she wanted. Alexander had accepted a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison in exchange for testimony against other executives involved in the fraud. His once mighty company was in bankruptcy proceedings, its assets being liquidated to partially compensate defrauded investors. The man who had broken my heart a decade ago had lost everything, including his freedom. Victoria, true to form, had emerged relatively unscathed legally, though her professional reputation was in tatters. She had relocated with the twins to Chicago, where her college roommate had offered her a position managing client relations at a public relations firm, a significant step down from managing partner at a prestigious law firm, but a lifeline nonetheless. My parents had chosen to remain in contact with Victoria and the twins, unwilling to sever ties with their only grandchildren despite their disappointment in their daughter's actions. I understood their choice, even respected it. The boys were innocent in all of this, and they would need all the stability they could get in the years ahead. As for me, I returned to my architectural studio in Seattle with a newfound sense of peace. The revelation that Victoria had deliberately manipulated both Alexander and me had somehow freed me from the last lingering doubts about my worth. I hadn't been rejected or found wanting. I had been sabotaged by someone who couldn't bear to see me happy. 3 months after my return, I received an unexpected email from Ethan, Victoria's son. My sister had apparently allowed the boys limited contact with me, perhaps as a small gesture of atonement. Aunt Maddie, he wrote in the earnest way of 10-year-olds, Mom says we're starting over in Chicago. I'm taking architecture classes after school now. The teacher says I have a good eye for design. I thought you might want to see what I'm working on. Attached was a sketch of a simple house, its proportions surprisingly sound for a child his age. I smiled as I typed my reply, offering encouragement and a few gentle suggestions. Whatever sins Victoria had committed, her son deserved the support his passion had been denied before. 6 months later, I met James during a sustainable building conference in Portland. He was an environmental engineer whose innovative water recycling systems complemented my sustainable design philosophy. Our professional collaboration evolved into friendship, then cautious romance. Unlike my relationship with Alexander, which had burned bright and fast, what James and I built together was thoughtful, steady, and rooted in mutual respect rather than infatuation. A year to the day after my father's surgery, I received another email. This one from Victoria herself. It was brief, lacking her usual polish. Maddie, I saw the announcement about your engagement in the Seattle Architectural Digest. He seems like a good man. I hope he makes you happy in all the ways you deserve. Victoria. No apology, no explicit acknowledgement of past wrongs. That wasn't Victoria's style. But the message represented something significant nonetheless, an acceptance that I had found happiness on my own terms, without needing to compete in the game she had always forced me to play. I didn't reply immediately, unsure what to say to the sister who had betrayed me so deeply yet was now struggling to rebuild her own life from the ashes of her mistakes. In the end, I sent a simple response. Thank you, Victoria. I am happy. I hope you and the boys find your way to happiness too. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement of our shared history, of the possibility of different futures for us both. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can become less defining with time and distance. 2 years after the Quantum Pay scandal, James and I married in a small ceremony overlooking Puget Sound. My parents attended, as did a handful of close friends who had supported me through the darkest days after leaving Boston. Victoria did not come, but sent the twins with my parents, a gesture that spoke volumes about her evolving understanding of boundaries and respect. Ethan, now 12 and even more passionate about architecture, presented me with a handmade card featuring a meticulous drawing of the Seattle skyline. Mom says you're the reason I love buildings, he confided. She said you always saw beauty in structures that most people overlooked. Coming from Victoria, it was high praise indeed, an admission that I possessed something valuable that she had never understood or appreciated. As I danced with my new husband under twinkling lights, with the sound of waves against the shore providing nature's soundtrack, I realized that my journey had come full circle. 10 years ago, I had fled Boston heartbroken, believing I had lost everything when Victoria took Alexander from me. Now I understood that day had actually set me free to build a life authentic to my values, free to find love based on genuine connection rather than acquisition or status. Victoria had stolen my fiancé, mocked my single status, and believed herself the victor in our lifelong competition. But in the end, her apparent triumph had been her downfall, while my apparent loss had led me to genuine fulfillment. Sometimes life's most painful detours lead to our true destinations. Sometimes what looks like betrayal is actually redirection. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma delivers its verdict not with thunderous vengeance, but with the quiet justice of allowing everyone to reap exactly what they have sown. I may never fully reconcile with the sister who betrayed me, but I've made peace with our story. Victoria took what she thought was my happiness, only to discover it was a gilded cage. I lost what I thought was my future, only to find a far better one waiting beyond the pain. That's the thing about real justice. It doesn't always announce itself with dramatic flair. Sometimes it simply reveals itself in the quiet reckoning of lives lived, choices made, and consequences faced. 10 years ago, I couldn't have imagined standing where I am now, not just surviving my sister's betrayal, but thriving because of the path it forced me to take. What a journey it's been, sharing this story with all of you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on family karma and justice. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone's attempt to hurt you ultimately led to your greatest blessing? Or witnessed someone's victory become their downfall? Drop your experiences in the comments below. Your stories help others feel less alone in navigating family complexities. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories of resilience and unexpected redemption. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes life's detours lead to better destinations. Thank you for listening, and remember, true happiness isn't about winning at someone else's expense. It's about building a life that reflects your authentic self, regardless of what others might think. Until next time, this is Madeline, signing off with gratitude for your support.